Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 170 Literary and Jury Charge. I'm going to finish the article that we left off from the last class called A Part for Chris. Okay, here we go. She returned to Chris. Christopher, this lady wants to know if you would like to try out for a part in a movie for television, she said. Chris's eyes widened. Yes, 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 he said. I'm going to be in a movie. Ha, a movie. Finally, a call came for Chris to report to Los Angeles for his first audition with Braverman. Frank, who made the trip with Chris, let his son handle the session with ABC alone. When it was over, Braverman told Chris, "You've got the part." If the trip to Hollywood seemed like a fantasy, making the movie was even more so. There was Chris standing with the movie stars, John Savage, on a sun-drenched dock in Key West, Florida, surrounded by lights, sound equipment, cameras, and crew. Wherever he went, he was a one-man pep squad. He was happy and excited to be there, working on a wonderful project, and didn't mind saying so. Down syndrome? No, Chris's new workmates were more inclined to agree with the term Chris had coined one day when he'd seen the letters on a brown delivery truck. Look, Mom, that stands for what I have, Up syndrome. The movie was broadcast in September of 1987, but the network decided not to buy the series. Chris went back to his volunteer work at PS 138. In February of 1988, he became a salaried employee at the school. Frank and Marion couldn't have hoped for a better or more secure job for him. But out in Hollywood, his performance had not been forgotten. He's completely charming, one ABC executive told Braverman. He jumps off the screen. Do you think you could make a series for him? Braverman set to work creating a series around Chris about a family, the Thatchers, with a son who has Down syndrome. He would try to show the issues they have to deal with in their daily lives. Plans for the prospective show took more than 8 months to complete. Then Braverman called Chris to Hollywood to shoot the pilot episode of Life Goes On. Chris had to be central to the action in many scenes. Could he handle the workload, the lines? The whole series depended on him. The questions were answered in the pilot's most demanding scene. In the script, Chris's character, Corky, is accused of copying from another student in order to pass an exam. To prove he hadn't, Corky meets with his teacher and parents in the principal's office. There, he has to recite the first stanza of Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Raven. For Chris, using cue cards would have been cheating. He would memorize the stanza. Finally, the day to shoot the scene arrived. Chris took a last look at his lines, and the set fell silent. Action, the director called. The principal asked disbelievingly whether Corky knew The Raven, and Chris began the poem. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. His father, the other actors, and the crew listened breathlessly. Could he possibly get it in one take? So, "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Tears welled in the eyes of actress Patty Lupone, Chris's on-screen mother, as she finished the scene. "Cut," the director called out. That was beautiful. The crew burst into loud, long applause. Chris had put an end to any doubts about whether he could handle the workload. ABC gave the series a slot on its Sunday night schedule. The debut broadcast on September 12, 1989, brought a chorus of acclaim and gratitude. One newspaper story quoted a young mother in Kansas who said that since the show, people had been coming up to talk to her son, special needs son, instead of shunning him. In New York, another said that Life Goes On had given his child a new fresh life and new dreams. As a handicapped person who has found success, Chris feels a keen responsibility to helping others like himself. When he was invited to the White House, the president taped a special public service announcement with Chris reminding viewers of the often overlooked capabilities of the disabled. Chris attends every function he can on their behalf. He tells audiences, "I think it's beautiful that people like me can watch our show and see what Corky can do." During the past season and a half, viewers have seen Corky Thatcher go to dances, press for more independence, argue with his sisters, worry about his future, and reach out to help another youngster with Down syndrome. Through Corky and by his own example, Chris Burke has won countless moral victories for mentally handicapped people everywhere. One of his most moving pleas came at the end of an episode where some of Corky's malicious fellow students nominate him for class president, but as a joke. Corky decides to go through with it, even though he knows it's just a mean prank. He doesn't win, but he uses his moment at a school assembly to speak for himself and all of the kids with Down syndrome. We have a life, we have dreams, we have things and want to do things just like you. All we want is a chance to be your friend. The constant flow of letters and photos sent by Chris's young fans provides eloquent testimony that he has achieved his two fondest dreams. He's a TV star and he's helping others with handicaps. His favorite is a note from a regular viewer in Iowa. "Dear Chris, I am 17 years old and I have Down syndrome just like you. You are my hero. You have changed my world." Today, he encourages kids from all over to follow their dreams and goes around and talks to other kids in other high schools. That was a neat article. Okay, I've got some jury instructions for you. Ready? The heirs of Alfred B. Schuessler, the deceased, are the real parties of interest in this action. They are Michelle Ray, the widow, and Denise Lee, age 12, Craig Roger, age 10, and Martin Bryan, age 6, the minor children of the deceased. If, under the court's instructions, you find that the plaintiffs are entitled to recover against the defendant, Matrix Systems Incorporated, you will award as damages each sum of money as will be just compensation for the loss which each of the heirs has suffered by reason of the death of Alfred B. Schuessler, the deceased. In determining the amount of such a loss, you may consider the reasonable financial support, if any, which each of the said heirs would have received from the deceased if he had lived, and the right to receive support, if any, from each of said heirs has been deprived of by reason of his premature death. Let me just note that the right of one person to receive support from another person is not destroyed by the fact that the former does not need the support, nor by the fact that the latter has not provided it. You must also consider the following. Number 1, the age of the deceased and of each of the heirs. Number 2, the health of the deceased and each heir immediately prior to his death. Number 3, the relative life expectancy of Alfred Schuessler and of each of the heirs. Number 4, the disposition of the deceased to contribute financially to support each of the said heirs. Number 5, the earning capacity of the deceased. Number 6, the habits of investment and thrift of the deceased. And number 7, the facts shown by the evidence that indicate specific benefits each heir might reasonably have been expected to receive from the deceased had he lived out his normal, natural life. In regard to life expectancies, you should only be concerned with the shorter of the two, that of an heir or that of the decedent. You will award reasonable compensation for the loss of love, for companionship, for comfort, for affection, for solace, or for moral support. In determining the loss which each heir has suffered, you are not to consider the pain or suffering of the decedent, any grief or sorrow of his heirs, or the poverty or relative wealth of any or all of the heirs. Also, you should include in any award an amount that will compensate for reasonable funeral expenses. Okay. I'm going to read to you a small selection from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. This is called Once a Week, Write a Heartfelt Letter. Okay, ready? This is an exercise that has helped to change many lives, assisting people in becoming more peaceful and loving. Take a few minutes each week to write a heartfelt letter. Does many things for you. Picking up a pen or typing on a computer slows you down long enough to remember the beautiful people in your life. The act of sitting down to write helps to fill your life with gratitude. Once you decide to try this, you'll probably be amazed at how many people appear on your list. I had one client who said, I probably don't have enough weeks left in my life to write everyone on my list. This may or may not be true for you, but chances are there are a number of people in your life or from your past who are quite deserving of a friendly, heartfelt letter. Even if you don't have people in your life to whom you feel you can write, go ahead and write the letter to someone you don't know instead, perhaps to an author or who may not even be living, whose works you admire, or to a great inventor or thinker from the past or the present. Part of the value of the letter is to gear your thinking toward gratitude. Writing the letter, even if it isn't sent, would do just that. The purpose of your letter is simply to express love and gratitude. Don't worry if you're awkward at writing letters. This isn't a contest from the head, but a gift from the heart. If you can't think of much to say, start with a little short note like, Dear Jasmine, I woke up this morning thinking of how lucky I am to have people like you in my life. Thank you so much for being my friend. Not only does writing and sending a note like this focus your attention on what's right in your life, but the person receiving it will, in all likelihood, be extremely touched and grateful. Often, this simple action starts a spiral of loving actions whereby the person receiving your letter may decide to do the same thing to someone else, or perhaps will act and feel more loving toward others. Write your first letter this week. It will be a good one. I'll bet you will be glad you did. Okay, I've got some jury charge here. The subject is murder. Okay, talk about complete opposite topics. Ready? There is no duty upon the court to comment upon the evidence at all. All the court has to do is render a verdict of guilty or not guilty, where people waive a jury and submit the matter to the court. I usually give to counsel and those people interested in the case the court's reasoning, how the evidence appears to the court. As I say, I am not going to attempt to comment on all of the evidence. There is no duty on the court to comment on it at all. Suffice it to say that if this defendant's story is to be believed, he is not guilty of murder or even manslaughter. If his story is to be believed, he did not even cut the man. The man stabbed himself or got cut in the scuffle, if he is to be believed. I do not mind saying to you that it is hard to believe his story. His story is quite unbelievable. It does not ring true that this man can go into a bar 2 or 3 times and there be no objection by reason of his nationality, but on this particular occasion, the last time, the deceased comes up to him and calls him a vile name and starts to struggle with him with a knife. Now, counsel, things just do not happen that way. If that was all the evidence in the case, why, I would have to find the defendant not guilty, but I cannot believe his story. Now, on behalf of the state, one witness, or on behalf of the state, one witness, the girl in the case, Rachel, was not very helpful, but it does appear that this defendant lived with this girl for over a year and that only a week or two previously she had left him. All right, so he contacts her there in this bar, according to her story, and according to her story, the defendant wanted to buy her a drink, and she refused. So, indefinite though her testimony was, it does show that there was some friction between the defendant and this Rachel. Now, on behalf of the other witness for the state, Mrs. Carter, she told a very clear and convincing story which jibes with all the facts in the case. She said that this defendant came there early on in the afternoon and was quarreling and having trouble with Rachel. The deceased tried to get him to stop and finally put him out of the place sometime during the afternoon. Later, the defendant came back after having the trouble in the afternoon and again had some contact with the girl, Rachel. When the deceased tried to get him to sit down at a table and behave himself or leave, he pulled out a knife. It appears very much to the court as if this defendant knew that he was going to have trouble there. He came back looking for trouble. In any event, if the fight started as he says it started, he certainly used more force than was necessary to defend himself. I will have to find this defendant guilty. I do not believe his story at all. I think the state has proved beyond all reasonable doubt that this defendant stabbed the deceased and brought about his death. The defendant says he did not mean to kill him. He did not mean to kill him, but he did mean to do him severe bodily harm, and death resulted from the injuries received by the deceased from this defendant. I will find the defendant guilty of manslaughter and sentence him to 10 years in the state prison. Counsel, I wish you would go out with him and explain to him. Just go out with him and explain to him what I said. I want him to understand. Okay, got a few more minutes. I've got some congressional record and the subject is condominium conversion. Ready? Mr. Speaker, the Business, Commerce, and Monetary Affairs Committee, of which I am a member of long standing, has been involved in an investigation into the rapid increase across the United States in the number of conversions of rental units to condominium units and cooperative housing ownership. Our concern is with the impact of governmental programs, policies, and activities on these conversions. This trend toward rental conversions has been dramatic. The Department of Housing and Urban Development predicts that this trend will continue to accelerate. These conversions raise issues of vital public policy, which includes the following: the rights of tenants, the price of housing, the availability of rental housing units, the allocation of diminishing mortgage money, and the dubious role of government. Research and investigation have revealed that conversions contribute significantly to increased housing costs and housing inflation, which is inflated by purchases of units. Frequently, conversions result in displacement of the poor, the handicapped, and the elderly. Condominium conversions and cooperative housings are a problem when few other rental units are available. This problem is spotlighted in major cities where rentals are scarce, such as Boston, New York, Houston, Dallas, and San Francisco. The hard facts are that the byproduct of the conversion phenomenon is a reduction in rental units. Large and small buildings are falling prey to conversion projects that displace thousands of people. In many areas, there are no restrictions on the number of condominium conversions. There are no safeguards against landlords who see an opportunity to reap a large reward in the conversion scheme. The legislation that I am proposing will repeal and substantially revise the Condominium Conversion Act of last year and will provide strong protection for tenants of rental units. And that concludes our jury charge and literary for the 170 class. Have a great day.